Hey guys,
Hello.
thanks for your patience. We are having technical difficulties with Zoom not wanting us apparently to do this tonight, but I'm glad that it finally worked and we made it on. But we're super excited to do this webinar, and this will be recorded so that people can watch it back, which is really exciting. So yeah, we'll give it like 1 minute, I guess, for people to continue to jump on, and then we'll get started with some introductions and things like that. And we're going to take you through a handful of different advocacy modalities and ways to get involved with Center for Lyme Action. And I think really, really approachable ways to do this that aren't scary. And I will say too, we'll do some Q&A at the end, so feel free either in the chat to drop your questions or in the Q&A function. Or if you just want to say hi in the chat, would love to know how you found this or where you're tuning in from, and all of the things. So, all right, well, I guess we'll get started. So, Olivia and I will let Olivia introduce herself, but Olivia and I are both lucky enough to sit on the Project Lyme board in different functions. And Olivia and I are both very, very involved in different types of advocacy, both personal advocacy around education for Lyme and tick-borne conditions, which we both have, or at the political level with organizations like Center for Lyme Action. So Olivia and I recently were just talking about how it can feel really unapproachable to get involved in advocacy. But in reality, there are some easy, really simple, approachable ways to get involved. So through this webinar, we really hope to showcase that and empower people to get involved. So Olivia, do you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll share about myself?
Sure. So, hi everyone. I am Olivia Abrams. I serve on the junior board of Project Lyme and originally got involved probably about a year ago, actually, through Ali Moresco's idea. And I am a Lyme warrior as well. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease when I was 7 years old after presenting with severe arthritis in my knee. I had multiple blood tests come back, and my doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And eventually, my dad had requested that they do a test for Lyme disease. And shortly after, I presented with a very bad rash on my face. So from there on out, went on a doxycycline protocol and some intense months of physical therapy. But thankfully, I think especially because I was a young kid, I was able to make a very strong recovery. And my family and I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out ways that we can help other people. So a few years ago, we started a company called TickMit. And if you don't know what TickMit is, we create chemical-free, innovative products to keep people and pets safe from ticks. And through that, I've really spent so much time hearing from other patients in the Lyme and tick-borne illness community, as well as researchers, other nonprofits, and have realized how important this issue is, how much lack of education there is, and also how lucky I am to be able to have the capacity to be an advocate for people who may not be able to advocate for themselves as much as they would like to. And that's really how I've been on this journey. And, with Allie's help and collaboration, we've been able to do some amazing things together so far.
Yeah, and I think it's so funny because that is something that I didn't even originally have in our outline, but I feel like advocacy becomes a lot more approachable when you almost have like a buddy to do it with. Like you and I would say like Megan Bradshaw as well, I would put into this category from Center for Lyme Action. Um, you and I do a lot together, so that it's not so burdensome on one person. And also it just it makes it better and it makes it fun. So it is nice to find somebody who's, aligned with you and do some of these things, together. And also it's nice to have somebody else to hold you accountable for things. So a little bit about me. My name is Allie. I'm lucky enough to serve as the board chair for Project Lyme, and I consider myself an advocate for general Lyme and tick-borne disease education, as well as policy. So I got sick almost 9 years ago with a mystery illness that nobody could figure out, and it took me 2 years to get diagnosed accurately with Lyme and tick-borne conditions. And in that time, I essentially became bedridden and had to stop, my whole life for this disease, and just realized, the injustices of the condition. They're endless, and it's everything from the healthcare system, denying that it's as rampant, of an issue as it is, to doctors. I had a doctor that flat out refused to test me for Lyme disease when I presented with very classic acute symptoms. Um, and it's been a 9-year journey to find like what has really worked for me. And I'm very grateful that I have finally found what those things are. And it's why I'm able to do things like this and hopefully help empower others to get involved in this journey. But I, have done many multiples of trips to Washington, DC to meet with my representatives in Congress and Senate. I do a lot of advocacy, obviously through Project Lyme, because yes, this is still advocacy, right? Just in a different form. I also am very open and honest about my journey on platforms like Instagram with Lyme and tick-borne conditions and advocating that way for change and for just more awareness and more preventative, um, things that people need to do. Because I do believe that prevention, is the best tool that we have against Lyme and tick-borne conditions, and so on and so forth. So that's a little bit about me and my experience with advocacy and my experience with this disease. So the first thing that we wanted just to mention is the kind of the current Lyme disease landscape, right? So there's all of these issues that are kind of culminating and swirling around, and it really contributes to the neglect, obviously, that Lyme and tick-borne patients suffer consistently. And I'm sure every single person on this caller that's listening back to this webinar has experienced this themselves. But, there obviously is a need for accurate testing. Our traditional testing from the CDC and things like the ELISA is less than 50% accurate, leading to long-term, needless suffering. There is a chronic denial of Lyme and tick-borne conditions, sometimes just flat out, and sometimes, around um, organizations not wanting to admit that it's actually as prevalent as it is. There is a general lack of education that medical professionals receive on Lyme and tick-borne illness. I've heard from some clinicians that they received as little as one slide in their entire medical school journey on Lyme and tick-borne diseases. So the need is great, across the board, whether it's political, whether it's personal, whether it's that you get involved with like an organization. Lyme and tick-borne illnesses are prevalent. I know that now there's about 500,000 new cases of Lyme disease alone in the US every year. I know that rates of things like babesiosis and Bartonella are steadily climbing, let alone alpha-gal, which I live in Tennessee and we are top 5 state for alpha-gal. And now there's about 450,000 cases of that in the US alone. So tick-borne diseases are becoming a huge issue and have been a huge issue here. Olivia, do you have anything to add to those?
Yeah, I would also add that I think everyone on this call would believe, and I think that there soon will be some more evidence of this, but that these numbers are actually a lot higher than we think that they are. And it's really just because of that one lack and ineffective testing that's currently out there, and also just the inability to correctly report cases of Lyme disease makes it very difficult to track the actual number. So the prevalence is probably significantly more than these numbers say it is and that we think it is.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. There is not a lot of state budget allocated to surveillance. And I think that, you might be listening and saying, well, why is that, a big deal? And it's, well, if we don't have surveillance both at like the human number where we're tracking the amount of human cases there are, but also with vector ecologists that are going around and collecting ticks and then testing them for these diseases, we really don't know what the vector-borne disease load is for these infections is in that area, which is where some of this policy and legislation comes in. So one of the organizations that you're going to hear us talk a lot about throughout this webinar is Center for Lyme Action. So Project Lyme is an underwriter of Center for Lyme Action. So we have a very strong relationship with them and we really support a lot of their work. They are one of the key reasons that the Kay-Hagan-Tick Act was passed in 2020, which allocated and secured a lot of different funds from different branches of government to research and fight tick-borne conditions like Lyme disease and some of the other ones that we have listed. I would also say that some of these organizations like Project Lyme and through, brand advocacy like Olivia does through TickMit, are the reason that, we had Senator Gillibrand host, a press conference this past August all about her call for funding for Lyme and tick-borne conditions. And through advocacy, like the two Alpha Gals are doing, and now with their newly formed Alpha Gal Foundation, in getting things like the Alpha Gal Inclusion Act to be taken really seriously. And now they have a lot of co-sponsors for that, which basically a co-sponsor is just when a piece of legislation has different representatives sign it to say that they support that legislation. You hear us talking about Center for Lyme Action, but like I said, we will get to that later on and also give you some pretty actionable ways to get involved with Center for Lyme Action. So advocacy can take many, many different forms. And I think that that's something that's really important to remember. I consider myself an accidental advocate. I had no intention in my life of becoming an advocate like I am now. I think it doesn't become as important to you with Lyme and tick-borne conditions until it happens to you. And then you realize that you have to do something with what little energy you have. And advocacy for me has looked very different at different points, in my journey. Like I said, I was essentially bedbound for 2 years. It was obviously very challenging, and I'm sure some of you have experienced that. And my first step in advocacy was sharing my story. I don't know if this resonates for anyone listening or listening to this back, but when I first got sick and then finally received a diagnosis, I thought my condition was rare. And I was afraid to talk about it because I wasn't sure if anybody would understand. And looking back on it now, my first true step in my advocacy journey was sharing my story with family, sharing my story with friends, letting them know that this can happen to anyone and they need to be wearing tick spray and doing tick checks. And the tick mitt, didn't exist at the time, but now using a tick mitt, and things like that. And then my next step was starting to talk about my journey on things like Instagram and social media. I think we forget that social media can be a really powerful tool for information and education. And even if somebody doesn't interact with what you are sharing, it does let them know that these things exist and they are a real threat. Um, you know, another thing that you can do if you're not ready to get involved with an organization like Center for Lyme Action or in a formal, capacity is offering to share your story through third parties like contributions to something like LymeDisease.org or a 501(c)(3's, blog or through their Instagram, right? And it can be like just a touch point for you, but it doesn't have to be something that's ongoing because I know that our energy ebbs and flows. A few other things that I just wanted to mention were if you do want to get involved with an organization at a more, ongoing prevalence, you might want to consider joining an organization like a Center for Lyme Action Ambassador or ILAD's Ambassador Program. And what this does is it kind of takes the pressure off of you to figure out how to advocate. A lot of really well-known advocates always say that the best type of advocacy happens when people come together in a really organized fashion. And when it happens under some of these umbrellas, they give you the action items to organize around. They give you the things to do that will be the most impactful for moving your cause forward, right? So the two that I call out are Center for Lyme Action and the ILADS Ambassador Program, just because those are the two that I personally know of and or am involved in and really like and really support. And I feel like they have good structure to them. What do you think?
Something else that I would contribute is I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are watching or will watch this webinar one day who might not necessarily be a patient, but maybe an ally or a caregiver. And there are many ways that you can advocate on someone else's behalf. Of course, some of the things that Ali said, but I also think it can just be the way in which that you help your friend or loved one. We're doing this webinar kind of around the holiday season, which can really be hard for people with chronic conditions. And so if you are, a family member or a friend of someone with a chronic condition, I think it can be really helpful if you're able to sometimes advocate or communicate certain things on their behalf. So for example, if you're going to someone's home for Thanksgiving, saying, my daughter, my son might have some problems eating what you have, like, is there something that I can bring to ensure that they have something to eat? Or is there something in particular that you might be able to make or have at Thanksgiving to ensure that my son or daughter or whoever can eat? Potentially reminding friends and family members, asking how are you doing to the Lyme warrior in your life can be really difficult. And so rephrasing things to like, how was your day? Like, did you, what were you able to do today that made you feel happy? Or something more along the lines of, is there anything I can do to help rather than just asking, how are you? I think that question can feel really difficult sometimes for people with chronic conditions who may not know what to say. So I think just trying to be cognizant of how you can help maybe the Lyme warrior in your life figure out how to make certain situations that could potentially be stressful a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point, and it's so often forgotten. And I think so many people are like those that are struggling with Lyme. Like when somebody does ask you how you're doing, it's always that question of like, well, do they really want to know how I'm doing, or do they want me to say I'm fine? And I think when people are just willing to actually listen, to how you're actually doing and what you're going to, like that's huge, for anybody listening to this that is either like a caregiver or a friend to
I
somebody with
also think,
that.
especially like another person, if you're not a Lyme warrior and you're not able to work, one thing you might be able to do is reach out to the company that you do work that might have a corporate social responsibility program and try to see if they might be able to, help you run an event or potentially raise money and match that money. I know a lot of larger companies match donations to nonprofits. So that would be an easy way for you to get involved and advocate and help. is trying to work through your company who may be able to provide resources that you might not be able to get on your own.
Yeah, that's a great point. It doesn't always have to be on you. And like, even if you donate $5 to an organization and then your company will match that, I think people forget that every donation really does add up and make a difference. And that this is a long, expensive road for a lot of these 501(c)(3)s to be able to fund the research that we do and fund things like the PSAs that Project Lyme, funded and then has been running since the spring. And it really is those donations that move the needle. The other thing I was thinking about as you were talking is looking for things that you can get involved in specific to your area. Ashley, who is the chair of the emerging leader board, the junior board for Project Lyme, has done a really great job in Maryland of finding whether it's, movies in the park, whether it's, farmers markets, forgot the word for that for a second, Lyme brain moment, farmers markets, like things of that nature, where it's in alignment with not only Project Lyme, but in alignment with like being outdoors, the exposure to ticks, the exposure to bugs. We all know that Lyme is a threat everywhere, but most people don't know that. So finding things in your area that maybe you can go and table at on behalf of an organization, even if it's not Project Lyme. Like I know that I think it was TickMit that donated a lot of tick mitts when Ashley did that in Maryland. And I remember she said that they all went like that because people just had no idea that there was such a threat of tick-borne conditions. And I think most of the time you'd be surprised that when you share your story to the general public now, um, at an event like that or at an event where you can table, um, you're met with surprise, not combativeness and not resistance, but like people just genuinely have no idea. So it's another easy kind of low bars to entryway to get involved. The other thing that you can do is I know libraries will offer either classes or meetups or sessions, mostly for, I think, like parents and their children. Children are the most at-risk group technically for Lyme and tick-borne conditions. So it is actually really important to drive awareness of this in parents, with especially with young kids. So signing up to do a short session, at your local library, we've heard that those are really popular.
Another thing I would say is not being afraid to talk about tick-borne illness in everyday conversation. What I've found, and like Ali was saying, is so many people don't know the prevalence of this problem. For example, I live in New York City, and we are starting to see ticks in certain parks throughout our city. And so just, mentioning to your friend in conversation, if they say, I went to the park the other day and I had a great time, saying, oh, did you perform a tick check? Because, we have ticks in the park, I think is a really easy way to advocate and keep other people safe. And what I find is that there are definitely certain groups of people who are more at risk and also less educated on this. So what I've seen a lot is there are certain members in our first responder community, like firemen and policemen, who are going into areas with ticks all the time, and yet they don't receive any education or training about this risk. And so being able to, help explain to, your neighbor who might be a volunteer firefighter, you guys should make sure that you're performing tick checks at the end of every job, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. Most people just don't know, and they don't know they're at risk, like our first responders. So I'd love to spend a portion of this webinar talking about something really actionable and also like very easy that you guys can do to get involved. Um, and this goes back to Center for Lyme Action. So when you hear political advocacy, don't drop from the call. It's not as scary as you think it is, and it also is completely bipartisan. We always say that Lyme disease doesn't choose sides, and it's a bipartisan issue. So no matter who you're aligned with, doesn't matter. This is the place for you. So Center for Lyme Action is a 501(c)(4) lobbying group. So it differs from a 501(c)(3) because they are allowed to raise money, but they are allowed to do political advocacy and lobbying, whereas a 501(c)(3) is not allowed to do that. So Project Lyme is a supporter of Center for Lyme Action, so we're very closely involved. Um, Center for Lyme Action does a whole host of different things that we are going to get into. But the main thing that they do is every single February, they put together a Lyme fly-in. So before COVID, advocates used to fly in from all over the country and convene in DC to meet with their people of Congress and their senators to advocate for change for people living with Lyme and tick-borne conditions. Now it's a virtual fly-in. So there's no cost, to attend and to participate. It's accessible because you don't even have to leave your house. You don't even have to have your camera on if you don't feel up to it. And the great thing is they literally equip you with everything. So you don't need a knowledge of policy to get started because they do all of the hard work for you and then some, which is nice. So their team provided us with a short list of calls to action, and we're happy to share this with you as well. And there will be a recording of this webinar after so that you can watch this back if there's things you don't remember. Because I know that I watch a lot of things and there's a ton of stuff that I forget until I watch it again. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that. So anyway, their team provided us with a list of items to share with you for ways you can get involved. And there's some really easy, actionable ways. And I hope that by sharing this list with you, it makes it sound more approachable. So the first thing is that there is training provided for this. There is literally no experience required, as I said. There have been some updates to their training sessions. If this is something that you have participated in the past, they have really refreshed their training to ensure that people who are advocating to their members of Congress and their members of Senate feel well equipped. So there's a couple of key items that are happening here that, once again, I'll drop all of this in the chat, so don't feel like you need to take notes. They are hosting a storytelling workshop with Generation Lyme. This will cover a lot on how to share your story effectively, and things that you want to mention when you're telling your story to your person of Congress or your member of Senate. A lot of the times with these fly-ins, it's not the member themselves that's joining, but it's actually their healthcare aide or one of their staffers, or if you're lucky, and this has happened to me in the past, it will be their chief of staff, which is really, really nice, because then what's happening is these people are taking our meetings, they're digesting them, and then they are sharing it with your member of Congress or Senate and making recommendations to them. Do you want to talk about some of the other trainings?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just a couple of great experiences I've had at the Lyme Fly-In before is that not only are you able to get to hear from other people who have a similar story to you, but you also get to hear from people who might be living in your community. And so, like Ali and I were saying earlier, it's a really great place to actually meet a friend to help hold you accountable or just go through this journey together. I remember the last time I participated, I only had a few other representatives when we spoke to my congressman's aide, and I actually very much kept in touch with those people because they live in my area. And so we've been able to, try to figure out how can we continue to have that kind of relationship with our congressman, how can we help each other, or how can we, do events together in our neighborhood. So I think that's a really great place to meet other people. And I also think a really important thing to our congressmen and senators is really just knowing how vast this issue is. And so even if you get on the Zoom and don't want to speak at all, you are another number. And the more numbers they have, the more seriously they take this issue.
Sorry, guys. Scout agrees that this is important too. I don't even know what he's barking at. Bars, I guess. Yeah, exactly what Olivia just said. This is one of those things where
There's
don't,
strength in numbers.
yeah, strength in numbers. We're gonna put Scout on those fly-in Zoom calls, 'cause apparently he has a lot to say. Um, if you aren't reaching out to your members of Congress or your members of Senate about this and letting them know that you are a constituent in their district and that this is impacting you, they literally just don't know, right? And we have this public outcry, and rightfully so, that Lyme and tick-borne conditions are not taken seriously by the government. But we have to share with them that we do exist and that we're living in their district, because when it comes time for them then to allocate funds and for appropriations, they look at what are the things that I was contacted about most, right? And then that's how they make a lot of those decisions. So a couple of more items with Center for Lyme Action to mention. Not only do they do a storytelling workshop with Generation Lyme, they also offer a fly-in training. And essentially, this is for new advocates and for those who would like some form of additional training. Do you mind taking this over for a minute?
Yeah. Do you have the, oh, so this training can typically be just really figuring out how to craft your story and writing a script, and also telling you a little bit more as to what the day is going to look like. So typically, you would get some sort of link to a website that says who your congressmen are and what time you'll be able to get on a call with them and what are the most important things to tell your story about. Usually when you get on the call, there's already a point person who has agreed to speak ahead of time, or you'll be asked if you would like to share your story. And so sometimes, because there can be so many people in a state or within a constituency, then you might not even have time to speak if you don't want to. So there's really no pressure. I also think it's a really great opportunity to learn if your congressman or your senator is already thinking about this issue. I know here in the state of New York, our senators very much care about this issue. But it's very possible that you live in a state where your congressmen and your senators have already done a lot of advocacy and you just aren't aware of it yet.
Yeah. Sorry, I just shut all the blinds on Scout, so hopefully we're okay moving forward. That was beautifully said, and honestly better than I could have said it, so I'm glad it happened. So some details on the fly-in itself. So the opening fly-in session is 2-18, so February 18th from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. Like I said, I'm going to drop this in the chat so you don't need to take notes. And this session, typically they will have like keynote speakers. So like I know the last, oh gosh, like 5 or 6 years, Chris Smith, has spoken, and they'll have other stakeholders either speak or provide like some kind of a recorded message, like Suzanne Collins, who has become a huge champion for Lyme and tick-borne conditions and was a major player in getting Kagan Tick Act passed. There will also be meetings with congressional offices, and you will want to block off all day when that day does happen and is announced. And typically, each advocate will get about 3 meetings that will last about 30 minutes each, secured for them. And it's typically 3 meetings because it's either with your senators, your congressman's office, or it will be with your more local representatives and their offices. And the local representative offices are fun because sometimes it actually is the representative themselves. And you really get to share your story and why this is important to you directly with them, which is pretty cool. When you go into these meetings, it's really nice because everybody who signs up for the fly-in receives a mailed hard copy folder to them, as well as a Center for Lyme Action scarf that they ask you to wear to your meetings just to show like solidarity and community. But in this mailed folder that you get mailed to you, it includes facts, it includes statistics, it includes talking points, it includes the direct legislative calls to action. Like refunding the K-Hagen Tech Act this year is going to be a huge initiative for Center for Lyme Action. And you can literally just go bullet by bullet and number by number and read off exactly what they send you. So they make it really, really, really easy. Once again, it's virtual, so there is no travel, no cost associated with this. And if you aren't able to participate in meetings for some reason, or you just don't feel comfortable yet, but still want to support, they do have a great need for those interested in helping behind the scenes on this. So don't feel like you only have one option in this level of advocacy and in this amount of support. You can very much help behind the scenes, and that is just as important. Anticipating what some of their needs will be for 2025. So one of the greatest needs that they have is filling out appropriations forms. So these are formal requests that Center for Lyme Action has to submit to every single office that is met with to help secure the federal funding that we ask for. So this would be a great opportunity for someone who wants to volunteer in a more flexible way, because you can help submit those appropriation forms and fill them out on your own time. So they provide all of the training and all of the support and all of the guidance for this. So once again, you don't have to figure out how to do this on your own. I have done this before. It's not scary. It's very easy. You just have to know how to use something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs or like Adobe, whatever you like. If you're interested in helping out behind the scenes, I will give you the website for Center for Lyme Action when I drop all of this in the chat, and just reach out at centerforlymeaction.org. If you're interested in participating in the fly-in, once again, I would go to centerforlymeaction.org and I would just sign up for their newsletter, and they do a really, really great job of helping you stay up to date on events and calls to action and anything, that you could need. So I'm going to drop all of that information in the chat right now. If it will let me.
Should we open it up to some questions if anyone has questions?
Yeah, let's open it up to Q&A for the rest of this. But I mean, just to recap, like if you feel comfortable, start to share your story. If you want to take this a step further, join an advocacy group, email Project Lyme and see how you can get involved. It could be as simple as contributing your story to our Instagram. It can be something like tabling, at like a local event that you have. You can get involved with organizations like Center for Lyme Action, or just reach out to your legislators, and send them an email to their website and just say, hey, I'm a constituent that lives in, whatever your area code is, and I am impacted by Lyme and tick-borne conditions, and I would like to see you support this in 2025. And I think that that is a great place to start.
It's definitely a great place to start, especially because we did just have an election. So there may be someone new in your office who hasn't heard from you before. I also think a huge part of advocacy is really just staying informed. And so following a number of nonprofits on Instagram, signing up for their newsletters, reading the news when you have time and energy here and there to see what kind of developments have happened in the Lyme and tick-borne illness community, I think is also a great way to advocate and to be able to be an effective advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody said that the chat was showing as disabled, so I did just allow attendees to be able to chat with the hosts and panelists. So, and with everyone. So hopefully that helps. And if for some reason I can't drop the Center for Lyme Action information in the chat, we'll make sure that it gets emailed to everyone who registered after. So.
Also, working with the Center for Lyme Action is completely free. You don't have to necessarily become like a formal member to get involved. You can simply sign up for their newsletter and they'll send you opportunities to, work with them directly, or even just shooting a quick email and introducing yourself and saying, my name is Olivia. I live in New York City and I have had Lyme disease for, 20 years and I would love to get more involved. And then they will ensure that you are getting all of the information necessary in order to make your voice heard.
Yeah. So it just let me drop the link to the Google document. For some reason, it wouldn't let me copy and paste everything. But that should give you all of the information for Center for Lyme Action that we just talked about. So let me look at the Q&A. So far, we just have comments, but not questions. If there's anyone on here that wants to submit a question, we're happy to answer any questions for the next couple of minutes, until we let everyone get back to their night. But so far, I'm so glad that this has been helpful for people. And I'm also just glad that despite what we have all been through, it makes you feel like you're not so alone in this, which is really, really nice. I also will say while we're still on here, like, I think that there's some advocates that have taken their journey with Lyme and tick-borne conditions and just need like an outlet for it and have done some really amazing things that have really turned into something like huge that have helped the community. Um, like I look at Tick Boot Camp, which was started by patients, and like Tick Chicks, which was started by a patient, and which are both podcasts. And Lyme Advice, which is an Instagram account that now has over 10,000 followers, where like all they do is share education and resources on tick-borne conditions and Lyme. Like those are huge deals. Um, Julie, yes. So Julie had a great question. She asked if any organizations would send her materials to use for tabling. Yes, I think that literally any of these organizations would send you materials, and they're all great about that. Project Lyme, Center for Lyme Action, iLabs, all of them offer some type of printed material for you. And I will say, like, if you're willing to table on behalf of an organization, they should be providing you some type of resource, to give out just to make sure you have what you need. The other thing you can ask some of these organizations for, if you do decide to either host an event or a chat at a library or something where it's more people rather than just like tabling where people are passing by, is sometimes organizations will either have a representative or they'll have, a doctor or a researcher in the area, and they're willing to introduce you so that you can have like a true expert there to talk about the condition and the signs and the symptoms and the needs. And when I first started doing my advocacy, we used to host just a community gathering at my parents' house. It was not fancy. It just was to get people together to learn and become educated on the illness. And the organization I used to do it with would always connect me with like the leading doctors in the area to have them there and to have them speak. And that was always really nice. All right, Olivia, is there anything else we should share or make a point of before we let everyone get back to their night?
I think the last thing I would say is there are a lot of universities in the US who have like a tick research center or who maybe have some sort of lab or study going on. So, another way that you could advocate is by helping people do research on Lyme disease. And so, either you or someone you know might be able to just like go into a focus group or provide doctors information about your story. I think that's also really helpful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's endless ways to get involved. And I think that people think of advocacy as being one thing, and in reality, it's a million different things, and it can really meet you where you're at and at your comfort level. And if you are looking to get involved with advocacy and patient advocacy, I would definitely reach out to Project Lyme, and they will give you a plethora of ways to get involved and to advocate. So, thank you so much to everybody who spent your Thursday night with us. And thank you to everyone who has taken the time to watch this and watch this back. And we're always here to be a resource. So you can feel free to DM us on Instagram or reach out to the Project Lyme email, and it'll get to us. So I hope you have a good night. Bye, guys.
You. Bye.